Have a Spacesuit Will Travel by Robert Heinlein. Excuse the extreme greenness of this book. I've had this paperback for a long time, and at the time when I got it, I was covering all of my paperbacks so that they would last longer. This was already old and many times hand, and green was all I had, so green it is. Never mind, it was never in good condition. So if you like classic science fiction and Robert Heinlein, as I do, I've read many of his books, and then you may be aware that he had a juvenilia series, and Have Spacesuit Will Travel is one of them. Now, this book is one that I've been reading and rereading since probably sometime in the 80s, a long time. And when I first read it, I hadn't even heard of juvenilia. The words young adult weren't in use yet. I just thought it was a Heinlein book. And I still really like Heinlein. I think that many of his individual novels were great. Later in his career, he kind of went into the Time Enough for Love, orgies in space, and it got a bit boring. But his early individual novels were great. I've read most of his juvenilia. I thought I'd read all of them. Now, if you like classic science fiction, there is an amazing YouTube channel that you should go to and check out. It's by Daisy X Machina, who does amazing videos about classic science fiction. They're not budget videos like mine. They're proper ones with well recorded, well edited and all that sort of stuff. I'll post a link below to the video that I saw a day or two ago that made me dip back into Heinlein. So Daisy did a whole series about all the juvenilia by Heinlein, including Podkine of Mars, which apparently isn't classed as part of the juvenilia because it wasn't published by the same publisher, which was Schreibner's. Okay, so Have Spacesuit Will Travel is one of the later juvenilia, and that might account for why, in my opinion at least, it's one of the better ones. It was nominated for Hugo Awards and Sequoia Awards, and I think it won some of them. Like I said, it's an old favourite, and I've been rereading it, but whenever I reread it, I find something about it, and I myself have changed so much since I first read it that I bring a different skill set and observation list to the table, so it is different each time, and I think that's brilliant. That makes a brilliant book that you can read it for decades and still enjoy it. Anyway, so at the beginning of Spacesuit Will Travel, we start off with Kip. Kip's full name is Clifford Russell, and he is an American teenager living in a small town. This was written in the 50s. And Heinlein set it in the near future. He was often quite coy about dates in his books, and he is here. This is a strange book in that his near future already had some solar system travel. We had moon bases on the moon, and there was regular moon travel, though it was very expensive. On the other hand, in every other respect, the book feels like 1950s America. You've got nuclear families where the woman stays home and is a good mother. Kip goes to a regular high school that doesn't sound very much different to the sort of high schools that you get in teenage movies, especially if they're set a little bit in the past these days. I get images of Grease, the movie, a fair bit from this. Now, Kip, early on in the books, conceives a desire to get to the moon. He's determined to get to the moon. How is he going to do it? The price of a ticket is far beyond his reach, and so Kip's family are not dissimilar to many other of Heinlein's families in his juvenilia books, are an atypical type family. When he goes to his father and says he wants to go to the moon, his father says, certainly. Dad, I said, I want to go to the moon. Certainly, he answered, and looked back at his book. I said, Dad, please, I'm serious. This time he closed the book with a finger and said gently, I said it was all right, go ahead. Yes, but how? He looked mildly surprised. Well, that's your problem, Clifford. That's the style of writing. It's very Heinlein, but it's restrained Heinlein, and I like this era of his writing better than other ones. Part of the 50s thing is the school that Kipps goes to, which doesn't have a lot of heavy engineering or what we'd call STEM sciences. And, yes, that's the other thing. Kip works in a soda stream as a jerk, or jerking in a soda stream, or something like that. And I suppose if you're American, or if you really love Americana, or especially early Americana, that makes sense to you. But you can't not laugh. I've got no idea what it is. I think, again, I'm getting images of Grease the movie, where you've got soda, I don't know, ice creams and soda put together in spiders. Only I don't think they call them spiders over there. Yeah, something. So Kip doesn't have any money, and Kip wants to go to the moon. He decides to enter a jingle contest. Actually, I think his father suggests it. And this contest, the winning jingle, the reward is a first prize, all expenses paid, trip to the moon and back. He does hundreds of jingles, sends them off. The process of Kip doing things is actually a really great part of the first part of this book. Kip doesn't win. And that's departure already, isn't it? Because these days, if you've got a protagonist trying to do something, normally he'd win. Kip gets third prize, and his third prize is a used spacesuit. And he decides to return the spacesuit to working order. And then we have an early part where it goes into Kip doing all the things to put his spacesuit back into working order. It's an excellent bit of writing, and I think that's the bit where Heinlein's background really works, because Heinlein apparently worked as an engineer in something fairly relevant to spacesuit maintenance. It is the spacesuit, really, I feel, that elevates this book fully to the science part of science fiction, because the realistic science details that go into describing the suit and its modification and its update are based on civilian aeronautics engineer from World War II and labs which developed pressure suits, which was Heinlein's background. So as a teenager, when I first read this book, I couldn't follow any of that. And I read it and went on to the bits that I enjoyed. As an adult reading it, it is really quite impressive. So if you like actual science in your science fiction, the first part of this book should impress you. It doesn't read like a young adult. It might have been juvenilia in the 50s, but it reads like a proper adult book, even if your main protagonist is a high school student. And I'm not sure how old he is, maybe, I don't know, I'm guessing 16 or 17. At the same time, Kip's father has realised that the curriculum of the school that he goes to is actually aimed toward the kids enjoying it rather than getting the STEM science, so he's forcing Kip through an actual education that might get him into a college, a university, when he graduates from high school. Now, having finished updating his spacesuit, Kip realises that he can't really afford to keep it, and he reluctantly decides to sell the spacesuit in order to have the money to go toward him going to college, with the idea that if he does well enough in college, he might actually get to the moon as a technician or an engineer as an actual purpose. As a last farewell to his suit, who he's called Oscar, he sets it all up and goes for a walk fully enclosed in the suit. Now, as he's doing this walk, he's idly broadcasting on his shortwave radio. It goes into a great deal of detail about the radios. And someone pops onto it, identifying themselves as Pee-wee, and requests a homing signal. Much to Kip's surprise, when he gives a homing signal, a flying saucer lands almost in front of him. This flying saucer isn't a ship that belongs to humans or that he's aware of, and after it lands, an 11-year-old girl and an alien try to flee. In the process, other people come out, they recapture the girl, the alien, and Kip. Now, these are our main three characters. So we've got Kip, and we actually know quite a lot about Kip. He seems a fairly humble, kind of bumbling, smart but average kind of guy. We've got Pee-wee, which we learn about from then on. She's an 11-year-old girl who's apparently super smart and who clutches a rag doll because you can't get away without girly stereotypes somewhere. That said, Heinlein does Pee-wee in a way that for the 1950s was quite advanced, because Pee-wee is represented as bratty, which as a teenager I couldn't abide. I like it better as an adult, and incredibly intelligent. 11-year-old girls who are incredibly intelligent were not the standard fare of the 1950s. So he was actually in advance of his time there. It still reads as a bit naff and a bit kind of weird sexisty in 2020s, but in 1950, way ahead of his curve. Okay, so the alien is called, at least Pee-wee calls her the Mother Thing, and the Mother Thing talks in tones, and it sounds musical or like birdsong, and I seem to remember that the book represents her talking in musical notes, but I can't see that from a cursory glance. Anyway, they do understand what she's saying. They've been kidnapped by an alien who is a horrible, horrible alien they call Wormface because his whole face is little worms. I can't help thinking of Cthulhu, but, you know, this is a horrible, horrible Cthulhu. There's also a couple of humans that are the, I don't know, muscle for Wormface, and they're the ones that recapture them. Now, at this point, you start to slip into what is your classic boys' adventure story. They get taken off, and Kip does indeed get to the moon, and they escape, and they're trying to get to the moon base, but they're recaptured, and then they and the spaceship go off to another planet. I think it's Pluto. At some point along the way, the other two menial humans are thrown into prison with Kip, and they tell him that their captors actually eat people, and then they vanish and they're presumably eaten. We don't see that. But I think at that stage we're on Pluto, and then we go somewhere else. There's a lot of escaping and then being recaptured, and then the Mother Thing somehow manages to make a bomb, and they plant the bomb. At this point some bad things happen, but the Mother Thing's species, who are from Vega 5 apparently, get them and they survive. Kip has been injured in getting free. On Vega 5 he's healed. At the same time he's been kept in observation. There's an anthropologist who learns about Earth from Kip and from Pee-wee. And when Kip is well, they all travel to the Lesser Magellanic Cloud to face an intergalactic tribunal composed of many advanced species that have banded together for self-protection. It is a terrible, terrible trope in fantasy and science fiction when you put an entire species or an entire race or an entire country or whatever, planet sometimes, on trial using one or two members of the civilization or race. It's a trope that keeps on happening. I think Robert Heinlein actually does it in more than one book. I know a lot of his contemporaries did it. Some more modern books have done it as well. It is never anything but a trope, and it's not my favourite. It's an eye roll moment because it makes no sense. It never does make any sense, and it can't. It just can't. It negates what it's trying to do, because it's always meant to be a smart and intelligent, a super intelligent race judging the other ones as to whether they're good enough. But that can never work because they're always judging that race based on a very minimal data set, and so it is here. So the worm faces are put on trial first. Their representatives are so arrogantly xenophobic, and they promise to destroy the animals. They regard all other species as animals, and they're promising to destroy the animals who dare try the only people, which is not a smart decision when you're being faced with extinction. They are deemed to be dangerous, and their planet is condemned to be rotated by 90 degrees out of the present space-time. It's well explained in the book, but it's an interesting concept, and I like it as a punishment. Only thing is, the planet is being rotated without the sun, probably dooming the whole planet to freeze to death. So that's interesting. Next, it's humanity's turn. And Pee-wee and Kip have obviously heard about the rotating 90 degrees, and they don't really want that to happen to Earth. They're put on trial alongside an ancient Roman centurion and a Neanderthal. The Neanderthal is judged as being from a different species, so he's taken out of the equation. And this is what I mean about it being a really stupid trope. You're going to judge an entire planet, and the chimpanzees and the dolphins and the dwarf minke whales and the ibis, you're going to judge them all based onto juvenile, adolescence, and a civilization from hundreds or thousands of years ago. Yeah, righty-o. Anyway, the Centurion is brave but has no idea what's happening. Kip and Pee-wee make recorded remarks. There's an impassioned speech by Kip, which I believe saves the day. The mother thing and another representative of another race argue that humans, as a short-lived race, are like children and should be allowed to grow. And you see what I mean about this being stupid. This is really stupid. They've just given humanity another thousands of years to mature as a race, but this is a race that they are judging on 2 children. Okay, it's a kid's book. He wrote it as a kid's book. It's clearly a kid's book. Its primary characters are kids. You often have young adult books where young adults are regarded as the only important members of civilization. I'm sure when I was a young adult or a 15 or 11-year-old, I took that better. I'm a grown-up. I don't anymore, but whatever. So at this point, Kip and Pee-wee return to Earth. That's when we find out that Pee-wee's father is a top scientist. Actually, no, we find that out earlier. Top scientist. Pee-wee's incredibly intelligent, but then we find out that Kip's parents are actually some of the most intelligent people around as well. Professor organises a full scholarship for Kit at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, where he's going to study engineering and spacesuit design. So happy ending, interesting ending. It's a great book. If you like classic science fiction and if you like boy-own adventure type science fiction, then it's great for you. If you want to read a book that had a very early female character in an atypical and pivotal role, then I think really there's a lot here for you. It's old, it's written from the 50s, and it feels that way often, but because most of the time they're in space, and your main protagonist on Earth is Kip, it doesn't feel as dated as some of Heinlein's other work does, or as some of his contemporaries feel. So yeah, a lot to like here. Interesting note, I was a teenager when I first read it. I loathed Pee-wee with the fire of 1,000 suns. She was an annoying, whiny, obstreperous, full of herself little piece of bleep. As an adult, I actually find her quite entertaining. And that's weird. She was written for teenagers. I didn't like her as a teen. I do now. Kip, you find more depth to him every single time you read, and it helps that the second time you read it, you already know all his back history and background and all the things he does. But he is never anything except a fairly interesting, slightly neutral character who you see through Heinlein's very nice writing, because he does have very nice writing when he tries. So yes, have Spacesuit Will Travel. I do recommend it for classic science fiction readers, and if you like Heinlein or his juvenilia or his books in any case, also go over to Daisy X Machina's channel. I mean, like, comment and subscribe on mine as well, of course. But go over to Daisy X Machinas, check out their channel. It is so much better than mine. Subscribe to that one too.